All right, so last we left off, we started talking a lot of this modeling was in object mode. Uh, in this video, what we're really going to be focusing on is subcomponent modeling. So with the temple, we built everything as objects, and we did a little bit of cutting of the objects, but for the most part, we stayed in object mode. So the first tool thing you need to know about subcomponent mode, just as a recap here, is the various kinds of subcomponent modes that are on objects. And this is true for all, pretty much, at least I'm aware of, all 3D applications. They all really kind of follow this general guideline. Is you have an object that's made of an object mode. It is made of several different kinds of subcomponents. These subcomponents are, for lack of a better term, make up the various degrees of dimensionality in rendering. So at the lowest level, which most computers understand graphics stuff, or at least computing, is points. In 3D rendering software, most of the time we refer to these as vertexes. Vertex are vertices for plural. Now, in Maya, after you've created an object, what you can do to access these is right-click and hold on an object, and you can go into Vertex mode. So I'm right-clicking and holding, getting this marking menu, and if I hover over anything in here, I can, when I let go, it will access that part. And there's also a huge drop-down list of other things in the future that we can mess with here. But this top part is the subcomponent mode. So if I right-click and hold over Vertex and let go, it will enter Vertex mode. And a lot of students accidentally get into this, and they don't even know how. Like, oh my God, it turned blue. And to get in and out of it is the same way. You can right-click and hold. And if you want to go back to object mode, which is how you move the object in world space, the entire object, you right-click and hold, go to object mode, and let go. So you can right-click and hold over this marking menu to switch into the object spaces. Now I'm going to go ahead and just continue going through this, and then I'm going to back up and talk about Vertex. But I can right-click and go to Edge mode, which allows you to select the edges. Right-click and hold and go into Vertex Face, which is kind of more of a legacy Vertex color painting thing. I don't use it as much anymore in the industry. It still pops up occasionally though, so it's still useful, but it's not used as much. What this allows you to do is paint, typically paint Vertex colors a lot easier on things. There's face mode, which is the word for selecting the little boxes or triangles on objects or inside of polygons. Talk about that a little bit. There's multi-mode, which lets you do all the things at once. I'm not a huge fan of this one, but it's one of the newer ones, and you're more than welcome to do it, but it lets you select points, edges, and faces. You can totally do that. And then there's UV here, and UV has UV and UV shell. UV is the texturing part of Maya, and yeah, we'll definitely talk about that, but not in this lecture. So you can use the marking menu, and again, I'm a fan of my quick keys, so here's some quick keys also. The F8 keyboard will allow you to toggle between object mode and whatever subcomponent mode you were in last. So in my case, I think it was face. So F8 lets you do that. Alternatively, you can just hit the F9 key to go straight to Vertex mode. See, I'm in Vertex mode. F10 for edge mode. F11 for face, and F12 for UVs. UVs looks very similar to Vertex. So there's two different ways right there. One way is through the keyboards, the F8 through F12 keys, or right-clicking and holding and using the marking menu. All right, so Vertex, again, these are points in space. The computer keeps track of these, but you can't render these. They're one-dimensional points in space with 3 different coordinates, and they're we don't see anything here. You can move these around to manipulate an object, but again, these don't by themselves render. When you get edges, i.e. 2 vertices or more, you can start getting an edge. And again, this is 2-dimensional, but doesn't render in a 3D engine. Once you get 3 or more, this is 4, you get a face. Now, if that face is made up of 4 vertices, we commonly refer to it as a quad. If, let me make another object here, sphere. If that face is made up of 3 vertices or more, and I'm just counting the points, we commonly refer this to as a triangle. And if it has anything more than this, 5 or more, we just commonly refer to it as an n-sided polygon. And there's nothing wrong with tries. They're fine. In fact, in game engines and most engines tessellate down to triangles. But for most 3D software, they prefer quads. So any 4-sided thing, because it lets them subdivide and do certain calculations a little bit easier for a lot of the various tools I show you. So you should strive for quads, 4-sided squares. It's absolutely okay to have triangles, but you should try to avoid 5-sided or more n-sided polygons at all cost. Technically, if you don't, it will work, but certain tools, what will happen is down the road they'll start like warping, and they don't work well on n-sided polygons. Like if you smooth, they'll start getting pinching and weird things like that. So it won't like break outright, but it will cause problems down the road. So I always advise that if you get an n-sided polygon because you do a certain operation, you try to fix it, ahead of time. Granted, that's you have to eventually come back and fix it. I mean, it doesn't really matter if you wait, but a lot of times, like if I'm there and it's going to be finalized, I usually fix it right away. Sometimes I don't, but I come back later. That's if I'm doing like exploratory stuff. But if I'm modeling and I know I'm comfortable with what I'm modeling, I generally fix it as I go. Because again, I do a lot of character modeling and things like that. So that kind of stuff I fix as I go. All right, so what can we do with this? All these subcomponent modes. All right, so subcomponent modeling is honestly no different than object-based modeling. That's why we took our time on the object-based one, and you guys move things around in object. The same stuff applies, but now we can do it at the subcomponent level. And this is true for all of them. So if I right click and hold, go to Vertex, and I grab a point, I can use my transform tools, the Q, W, E, and R keys. Remember, Q is select, R is translate, E is rotate, and R is scale. So W for translate, I can grab this and start moving this around. And I can totally break this box pretty quickly. Wow. Let's just break this. Your selection, well, yeah, it is your selection. Your selection tools work the exact same way when it comes to subcomponent mode. I can grab 2 things at once. I can hold down Shift and toggle select, grab more things, Shift, toggle select to deselect things, and so on. So all that stuff works the same. Now, another great thing about subcomponent modeling is, let me make a copy of this real quick. If I am in subcomponent mode on this thing, I do not have to worry about selecting anything else. So when you are in subcomponent mode, you're isolated. You're in an isolated view. And as long as you get one piece of the subcomponent, you don't have to worry about accidentally grabbing something else. So you never have to worry about, oh, I'm going to accidentally grab that thing as well. If you miss it completely, see, I'm missing the subcomponent mode completely, then yes, it will go grab something else. Now, you can also enter subcomponent mode on 2 objects at once, in case you were wondering. Same thing. I can, hit, I'm going to hit the F8 key in this case, or come over here and hold down Shift and grab both things. So I can have both things. I can select them both before I enter subcomponent mode as well, and I can have more than one thing in subcomponent mode. But whatever is in subcomponent mode is isolated, unless somehow you go add it to it. So it's a little tricky on that part when you're doing multiple objects. Most people tend to only subcomponent model one thing at a time. However, totally can do that. So that's Vertex Mode. Now, ironically, the difference between Edge Mode and Face Mode is nothing different than Vertex Mode, both in terms of functionality of what you do, as well as what you're actually doing to the object. So if I were to come in here and select Edge Mode, for example, and select this edge, and move this edge, purely from a technological standpoint, it's no different than me going and grabbing these 2 vertices and moving it. It's absolutely the same. What they've done is they've just made it easier for selections in this case, so you don't have to grab those 2 points. And when we get down the road, when we start talking about certain tools, some tools work better in certain modes. And that's really the only difference between you grabbing an edge and moving those 2 vertices versus, you know, grabbing 2 vertices and moving it. There might be a tool down the road that works better in edge mode, technically, but in the end, you're always messing with vertices. Last one on here is face. If I grab the face, I can move a face around, and that's just those squares. Again, I can do more than just move, by the way. I can also scale and rotate. And again, this was done with the E and R keys, and so on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create another object here, just to cover a few more things about subcomponent modes, which are very handy. And you know me and my quick keys, so let's get ready to have, well, these aren't really quick keys, but shortcuts, let's call them. So if you are in edge mode, in fact, actually, I think they added this to Vertex mode recently as well, you can go into edge mode. Once you're in blue, you can double click on any edge and you can select an edge. And again, remember, this is how we get in and out of subcomponent mode is to right click and hold. So I can double click and select an edge. We can also do this with Vertex now. This is actually relatively new. If we click on a vertex, hold down Shift and double click an adjacent vertex, it will select a vertex ring, or loop actually. All right. So again, double clicking on an edge will select an edge ring or loop. And on vertex mode, you have to click one vertex first, hold down Shift, and double click an adjacent one, and I'll draw a vertex loop or ring. Now, this will not work across anything other than quads. And this is why I mentioned earlier how there's nothing wrong with triangles, but certain things won't work across them. So you can see when I did edge, it goes all the way around this sphere. But if I try to do it vertically, it will stop. Because once it gets to the triangle, it doesn't know how to divide that basically by 2. So it can't make that edge selection across that. It just stops. So anytime it hits an inside of polygon, or anytime that hits a try, it's going to stop. Now in this particular case, I mean, I can just hold down Shift and double click this one over here, and there we go. So it's not a huge deal, but just people are like, why isn't this working? Again, just know that certain tools will not work across triangles and inside of polygons. Okay, so vertex, we can grab, you know, edges and rings. The loop, we can grab edges and ring. We can also do this with faces. It works the exact same way as vertex. Select a face, hold on Shift, double click an adjacent face, and it'll go around. Same thing up here. Select the face, double click an adjacent one, and once again it goes up. So interesting ways of doing subcomponent selection. So for example, if you want to make something interesting, select that face ring. I'm just using the scale tool, the R key. Maybe I'll scale on the Y, and I have no idea what I'm actually making right now. I'm just kind of playing right now to showcase the various things you can do. But once you have quick and easy ways to select things, you can rapidly change shapes of things and really start having a lot of fun, in my opinion. Now, as I'm playing here, you know, like I said, kind of through these lectures, you know, talk about this process. If I wanted to select this top part, I can totally get in here and start selecting this, but select through method makes this a little difficult. Granted, there is more than one way to do this, but how I generally, if I wanted that top part, how I would select this is I'd tap the space bar, go to my 4 view, I'll switch these to wireframe, tap the space bar again, and I'm going to drag a marquee box across the top part here. I find that it's the fastest way instead of switching to like a brush selection tool or anything like that. Just, you know, if I wanted just this top part, maybe I want to make it flat for some reason, and all I'm doing to make this flat is I'm going to scale it to itself on the Y. I'm just going to scale it a couple times. And there you go. You can see I'm scaling to the Y. So I don't know what this is. It's a spaceship or a weird top. I'm just, like I said, I'm just kind of manipulating these things to showcase different, different, different ways of. In fact, look more like a spaceship this way, I think. 180. Go over here to the channel box, type in 180, flip it. There you go. Now it looks like a spaceship. So I'm just showing off different ways of manipulating objects by making selections, selecting rings, and scaling the object, those things, using the exact same scale, translate, and rotate tools that we used when we were messing it with all this stuff in object mode. Okay, so that's interesting. So we got our selection methods here. And you can see that geometry is important. You need what you have to, geometry you have, you need it to obviously manipulate things around. Obviously no brainer. But I say this because students oftentimes will add geometry when they don't need it. For example, if I come in here and I'm just going to increase the subdivisions. If you remember from our previous lecture, the Polygon Inputs, you select an object, go over to the the inputs. We can manipulate things over here. I'm going to increase the subdivisions at start, and you can see we have these divisions. Now, a lot of students will start adding divisions to things, and there's lots of ways to do this, so it's not the only way. I'm just showing you the way you guys already know. And maybe they manipulate these things and like, okay, I need these 3 up here, and maybe you need this one, and so forth. But because they needed it up here, and the way they added subdivisions, they stop needing them down here. And again, I come from a mobile industry primarily for a lot of my art background, and you had to be very frugal with your poly counts then. Now it's not as a huge deal anymore. It's still considered good practice, but I wouldn't say it's a technological requirement. And this leads me to if the geometry is not changing shape for some reason, like this, there's no shape change at all. This edge is not doing anything. It should not exist. And even though again it's not most computers can handle the extra poly count, it's not about that. It's about keeping your models clean, because as you will experience later when you start doing certain operations, it can get messy very fast. So you want to keep things clean as you go. So let's talk about how to add, and in this case remove, edges on objects that you don't that you're messing with. So you can create your polygon primitives as a starting point, and you know how to manipulate those subcomponents. Now, sometimes you're going to need some stuff somewhere, and you take away. So that's where we're at now. So to take away, it's actually very easy. You select the subcomponents in question, and depending on what kind it is, there's different ways of deleting it. But the most common way, at least for me at least, deleting it is edge mode. So I like to go into edges, and you can select one at a time, but in this case, I'm going to get rid of this entire ring down here. I can double click this, and you can see I can select this edge. Now, if you hit the delete key or backspace key in your keyboard, when you have an edge selected, and I go backspace delete, it goes away. However, this is kind of a trick. What Maya has done, and I'm not sure this is like just super legacy, I guess, what it's done is deleted the edge, but not the vertices. If I right click and go into Vertex Mode, you can see the vertexes are still there. The vertices are still there. And this does throw a lot of students for it causes problems because they don't know. This is a common mistake I see. And then now we've created inside of polygons. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if I come in here and try to add edge loops or select things, it won't work anymore. You can see why isn't it working? Why is I hit this and I'm double clicking and I can't, because these are now considered inside of polygons. So if you hit just backspace and it leaves the vertices behind, that's that's most likely the incorrect way of doing it. There's time for it, but most likely that wasn't your intent. So I'm going to undo. So what they've done, undo back, undo back, undo back, undo, undo, undo. We're almost there. There we go. All right, so what you have to do instead, and it's just one extra key, you have to hit Control and Backspace. And it's found, again, I like my quick keys, but all this stuff's found up in the menus. In fact, I gotta find it because I don't use them that often. Delete edge vertex. So there it is. Delete under Edit Mesh, delete edge vertex. It's Control and delete, or Control and Backspace will work as well. So if I do Control Backspace, so you add Control to this, and it will also delete the edge and the vertices at the same time. So that's the proper way of deleting an edge. So now you can see I can go and select that face ring or face loop. No problem. So that's how you take away geometry, at least at edge mode, and in my opinion, vertex mode as well. If you wanted to take away a single point for some reason, you can do that. You can do that as well. If I just select a thing, in this case, I can just hit delete. Nope, not that one, because it's unnecessary. Oh, making mistakes here. Hold on one second. Let me undo back. There we go. I had to hit Control, and I was incorrect. You do have to hit Control and delete. So you can see we can delete them. I don't know why I would do this in this case, but you could. Because again, I like to keep, you want to strive to keep your geometry quads, but there might be a case when you're working on something where you're going to carve something out there, and that's the reason why you might do it. Maybe you're like, okay, I'm going to get rid of this edge and vertex, and I'm going to move these around, and I'll talk about how snapping in future lectures. But I mean, there are cases that you do it. But again, the most common way of deleting things is by loops or sections of it. Now, faces, you can also delete faces, and we actually did this in the first lecture series. You can delete faces as well, and what this tends to do is make things hollow. In fact, we did this for the top of the temple. So if I come in here and straight up just delete these, we can make, let's just, I don't know, a house. You can see it's completely paper thin, and the inside is, for the most part, pitch black. This is Maya's way of denoting what the inside of an object is. Not to get too technical, but objects have something called normals, meaning that how the 3D renders something, it renders generally one side. Yes, we can go make it render both sides, but then it's twice as expensive. So by default, objects only render one side out. And honestly, I think it will render fine in Maya. I can't honestly, I'd have to test it and remember, but in a game engine, this would be transparent. By default, you can make things render both sides. And I'm sure you guys have done this when you've played a video game, especially like a first-person shooter where you play a character, and then suddenly the camera goes inside the character's head, and you can see the rest of the world, but you can see like maybe the teeth or the eyeballs in a character. That's exactly what's happening. The camera's accidentally going into here, and as you can see, it's solid black here. This means it's transparent. This is the back side of a face. So in a game engine, you could see through this. So that's what happens when your camera goes into the character's head. And then of course they don't build the inside of the head double-sided because that would just be creepy at its own right. But it would be twice as expensive at that point. So they don't do that. They just try, and some companies fail miserably at this, but they try not to have the camera go into the character's head. And the same thing, when you clip through a wall, same idea. You usually see that kind of behavior. Why would we do this? Eventually, I'm going to cover the extrude tool here shortly, and we can extrude this and obviously give this some depth and things like that. And our temple thing, we didn't even bother doing that. We just stacked it, straight up, on there. Or another video game example is, let's say this is a ground piece. There is zero reason for me, unless I really think we're going to see the bottom of this. Let's just say it's a building. There's zero reason for me to keep that bottom part down there, assuming you can't go into this building. So we would delete those bottom faces typically to save memory. If it was extreme enough, if it wasn't that many, then maybe some artists and some teams might keep it. But if it's a really complex building and you could save thousands of faces by just deleting the ground off of it and stick it in the ground, trees is a good example as well. Then a lot of times people will delete them to save memory. Okay. So we deleted faces. We talked about deleting edges. How do we get edges back? Again, there are several ways of doing this. You can do it at the inputs when you first create an object, but that's only good when you first create the object. After that, the inputs are a no-go. You can't go back to the inputs. This is one of Maya's weaker points, I would say. If you can mess with it, it's probably going to break. So you don't generally use inputs and change the order of polygon count after you start manipulating the object. What you do instead is you use tools. Maya is really good at this aspect of doing it. And they recently combined all the tools they had, for the most part, into one tool. I'm going to go ahead and make something simpler for this. We'll start with just a plain cube. So what they did is they combined them in one tool, and I believe the default, I believe this is the default quick key, is Control-Shift-X, and you get this little X-Acto looking icon. If you don't like quick keys, or maybe just you don't learn as fast from them, excuse me, it's found under Edit Mesh Multi-Cut tool, I think. Let's see, Mesh Tools Multi-Cut. So up in Mesh Tools Multi-Cut, that is the tool. And again, it's Control-Shift-X on for the quick key. And again, you won't see the mesh tools unless you're in the modeling tool set, but you can use the quick keys no matter what tool set you're in. All right, so Control-Shift-X, and again, it looks like a little X-Acto here. And the reason this tool is pretty neat is because they smashed a bunch of tools into one. So this tool takes a little bit of getting used to because they smashed them all into one. And it depends on where you click and how you do things. So if I were to hover over the model, you can see it's already trying to snap to these points. What that allows you to do is you can, okay, I'm gonna draw a point here. I click on this vertex, and now if I come a little farther to an edge, I'm just clicking and holding. You can see I'm drawing this line, and I'm going to be creating an edge here. And I like how it measures out the percentages too. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it kind of even measures out the edges. And you can actually hold on Shift to snap this as well. So this is just fantastic to me. So if I want it to be at 50% right there, boom, I can do 50%. And you see that edge is halfway there. Now this is a continuous tool, a persistent tool, meaning it will not go away until I tell it to. So like you said, it's ready to keep drawing. So if I come down here and click on this edge down here and hold, same thing, I'm ready to draw an edge. Hold down Shift. You can see I can turn on the snapping function of it again. Let go. And you can see maybe I'll come back. And then maybe I'll do this up here. Maybe I'll click this edge and I'll go drag all the way to the corner. And when you drag to vertexes or start at vertexes, start at any vertice, it's not creating new geometry, it's using that point. Right? That's really great because you don't get double vertices in one spot. So you can see, because I actually closed it off, I can keep going if I want to, but I'm not going to. I've kind of made something interesting here. And let's say I'm ready to, I want that cut. How do you do it? And it's real simple. It's just hit enter. When you're done, you just hit the enter tool and it will commit the cut. Please note that if you try to do something like ridiculously complicated, let's say like 50, 60, continuations over a complex object, it might backfire. So just maybe do a few at a time, hit enter, do a few more at a time, enter. It's pretty good about that now, but like I said, you'll see if you get if you try to break it, you probably can. So just take your time with it. All right, so now you can see maybe now I can come in here and grab this edge and move it around and maybe soften that or something, things like that. So I'm creating geometry specifically where I need it on this one. So that's the default function of that tool. I'm creating geometry specifically where I need it. And again, if I want to bring it back up, Control-Shift-X, or if you're lazy or just optimize, remember the G key will repeat your last tool. So if you want to hit one button instead of 3, oh, sorry, that's wrong. That's incorrect. That's for tools. I can't remember what they call it. They broke things into actions and tools. I can't remember which one it is. So I'm incorrect. So nope, it's Control-Shift-X. So you can see I don't have to connect either. Also, when I do these, so I can totally, if I want to make inside of polygons, I can make something really atrocious. Come on. See, this is what I was talking about. Sometimes it just doesn't want to go weird. When you start wrapping around itself, it gets kind of picky. There we go. So just repeat. So you can see that is absolutely awful, just awful. I've created that's technically a quad. That is 1, 2, 3. That's a quad 2. It's just weird. This is an inside of polygon. Got a triangle over here. Yeah, just no terms of flow. This is just awful. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so I'm not even done with the multi-cut tool. The multi-cut tool, that was just one aspect of the multi-cut tool. What else can you do with the multi-cut tool? Because I botched this model completely, I'm moving to a different one. What else can you do with the multi-cut tool? If I hit Control-Shift-X again and go back into it, if I hold down Control while I'm in the multi-cut tool, it'll allow you to begin to cut loops or rings. It's almost the same as how we did the double click to select it. It works the exact same way, but you're making cuts. So I'm holding down Control now within that multi-cut tool, and whatever edge I drag over, it's going to draw the opposite direction. So if I'm holding down Control and I hover over a vertical edge, it's going to cut horizontally. If I hover over a horizontal edge, it's going to cut vertically. And again, for those that you see what's happening here, it's not going any farther because remember that these are tries. You can't cut across the tries. The exact same way the selection tool works. But if I do a couple cuts in here first, you can see it will indeed go across those because they're quads. It just stops at the tries. Now, granted, if I were to do a cut here, this will get weird, but I'll do it. There's a cut there. This is technically a quad now. It's going to look weird, but I'll do it anyway. Hold down Control, and you can see it's I don't know how it's figuring this out. I'm sure it's logical, but now it's trying to cut across it and making something completely weird. But that was technically a quad, so it makes the cut. And now, yeah, it gets really bad. So don't bother trying to cut across tries. If you did something like this, I mean, this is totally fine. Again, if you did something like this, maybe you came in here and selected these edges, and you could move these to get something. Maybe you're doing some sort of like bevel or something inside something. All right. Actually, it reminds me of a selection thing I missed here. So yeah, I'm jumping around but I forgot something I mentioned on the selection tool. One last selection method that you can do, again, because we have edge loops and things like that, and I forgot this one. If you select an object, you move several over, and then you hold down Shift and you double click, it'll go from that point to that point. So you can see it only did the ones I needed. And this is true for all of them. I forgot this one. So face, hold on Shift, double click over here, it goes from there to there. As opposed to if I do the adjacent one, it goes all the way around. And this is true for all subcomponent modes. Fun little tips and tricks here. This stuff, I mean, it may seem boring, probably, but it really speeds up your workflow. These things. That's why I said dedicating a video just to this right now. Okay, so there was a selection I forgot. Let's see, what else do we got? Back to the multi-cut tool. The last multi-cut tool option that you can do with this. So again, I'm making some copies here. Again, Control D to anything, and just remember when you make copies, they're right on top. That was from the previous lecture. If I hit Control Shift X again, go into multi-cut, and I have my little. Try that one more time. I didn't have something selected, so you can't see the exacto. You can see I can. One second. Control Shift X. There we go. There we go. I have to have it selected first. So you can see I can also draw from outside the model by clicking over here with Control Shift X, and I can drag this line. And I call this like the James Bond laser. What it does is it's going to cut an edge all the way through the object, and it uses your camera view port as the kind of directionality of that cut. So if I let go now, it's going to laser cut all the way across through. And if I make my camera at a weird angle and do it again, This is by no means good practice. I'm just showing you that it uses your camera angle to determine the cut. So you can see, you can't keep this going, and so on. That is hideous as well. So you can do multi-cut like that. And the other cool thing about that particular version of multi-cut is you can do it on multiple objects at the same time. So if I do Control-Shift-X, and maybe I'll just go to like a side view or something. Nope. One more time. There we go. Draw a line. You can see, cut across them. You see, I have a cut across all of these. Maybe you're doing a game where you want to, or an animation where you're doing a cut and you're going to zoom or make a stack of something. You can see you can make a cut across multiple things at one time. Now that tool, I believe also, I might be incorrect about this, if I hit Control-Shift-X and start dragging, if I hold down Shift, it does lock in increments. That looks like 15-degree increments to me. And this can be changed in the tool settings, which I haven't talked about, but just remember that, and I'll talk about the tool settings probably very shortly. You can change the increment that it snaps. So right now it's in 15-degree increments. And you can see cuts. So there's a lot of things you can do with just this one tool. Definitely one of my favorites in there. Heavily used in modeling, and you can do a lot with it. All right. So that's the subcomponents as well as how to add and take away geometry. By no means the only ways, but just I wanted to start off with just those kinds of basic manipulations there to get you guys going. All right. See you guys.